All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Transportation Commission meeting. Typically, it would be Chair Brabrand who would open the meeting, but she is not here tonight. So I'm going to kick us off. First, I'll call roll, and then we'll request a nomination for Chair Pro Tem. So we'll start with roll call. Commissioner Gates?
Yep, present.
Commissioner Hayes? You'll
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Kabidi?
Present.
Commissioner Levy?
Present.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Present.
Commissioner Tyner? And Chair Brabrand is absent. So with that, could I have a motion to nominate a Chairman Pro Tem?
Yeah, I'll motion to nominate Jill Hayes to be the president, or sorry, the chair pro tem.
Thank you. Chair Gates, is there, Commissioner Gates, is there a second?
I second.
And that second is Commissioner Kabidi. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. So by unanimous vote, Chair Hayes, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Bridget. All right, good evening, everyone. This meeting is being conducted remotely via Microsoft Teams. For those watching this video in the future, the state of Illinois is currently under a stay-at-home order issued by Governor J.B. Pritzker due to the coronavirus global pandemic. As a result, all in-person governmental meetings have been canceled. However, the Open Meetings Act now permits electronic meetings of governmental bodies like the Transportation Commission, and this evening we are conducting our business in compliance with the state law. This meeting is being broadcast live on our local cable access channel 6. It is also being broadcast on the internet on YouTube Live, and the URL for that is www.youtube.com/user/Village of Wilmette/live. If you would like to participate in the meeting, you may use the Microsoft Teams app on any device for free, no sign-in required. The link to join each meeting is posted on the website calendar at www.wilmette.com/calendar. The meeting will be archived on the Village's website, as we do with our other televised public meetings. A remote meeting requires a different mechanic for public participation. To ensure that our residents, business owners, and other interested parties have the opportunity to participate in this meeting, we have solicited public comment prior to the start of the meeting via email. If you sent an email to publiccomment@wilmette.com prior to the start of the meeting, the comments have been shared with the commissioners. If members of the public who are watching the broadcast would like to participate during our designated public comment periods, you may submit your comments through YouTube Live at the appropriate time, and a member of the Village staff will read your comment to the Transportation Commission. All comments to the Transportation Commission will be recorded in the meeting minutes as we typically do. Everyone will have joined the meeting today muted. When it is time for public comments, those joining through Teams can toggle their mute status by clicking on the microphone icon on the meeting toolbar. Those joining us by audio conference dial-in can toggle their mute status by pressing *6. Only attendees can unmute themselves. No one can unmute another attendee. And just a reminder that public comment can also be provided through the Village's YouTube live stream. For the meeting, the Transportation Commission received a packet of agenda materials. These materials are also posted on wilmette.com so that residents and other interested parties can review the very same materials that the Transportation Commission members received. This meeting packet contains the agenda, minutes of the last Transportation Commission meeting, a single agenda item, and public comment. Now we'll move on to the agenda. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the August 11th, 2020 meeting of the Transportation Commission. Is there a motion for approval of these minutes?
Motion to approve. Xander.
All right, we had a motion. Do we have a second?
I had one comment. I communicated this to Dan, but my name was misspelled on the cover page. So other than that, I don't know how does that need to be separately motioned or something? I don't know.
And can we just make a note to make that change for the final?
Then I'll approve second.
Bridget, can that be changed on the minutes?
I'm sorry. Yes, we'll go ahead and make that change. So we have a motion and a second by Commissioner Gates.
Okay, so all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Is it possible to check in?
I'm sorry. We'll check.
Sir, when we get to public comment, you'll have an opportunity to introduce yourself.
No, sorry, this is Commissioner Tyner. I wasn't
Oh.
able to get onto Microsoft Teams, so I called in.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Tyner, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
We'll note your attendance.
Thank you.
All right. Now that we have everyone here, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is review of the Kenilworth Gardens Traffic Calming Evaluation Report.
All right, and good evening, Chair Hayes, members of the Transportation Commission. I'll begin this item tonight with a brief overview of the procedure to consider implementation of traffic calming treatments. From time to time, village staff has received excessive speeding concerns from the east-west streets in the Kenilworth Gardens neighborhood. Therefore, in 2020, the village hired traffic engineering consultant Kinley Horn and Associates to conduct an evaluation of the Kenilworth Gardens neighborhood. So in accordance with the village's traffic calming policy, village staff has collected traffic data over the years, which is included in the meeting materials tonight. We're now at the point in the process where evaluation of the perceived problem and potential alternatives are being presented to the commission for consideration. What village staff is seeking tonight is direction from the commission to adopt an action, do nothing, or pursue further studies or combination thereof. If the commission decides to take action on a traffic calming treatment, village staff will prepare a summary of the proposed treatment and ballot the affected block. If the treatment receives a favorable vote of 60%, village staff will proceed with implementation. To provide an overview of the evaluation conducted on the neighborhood, I'll now hand it over to Peter Lemon with Kinley Horn and Associates.
Great, thanks, Dan. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, I'm gonna share my screen and have a, let's see if this, I guess just confirm that you see this screen.
Yep.
I do.
Okay, great. All right, let me cycle back up, make sure I'm on the right. Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Lemon with Kinley Horn. As Dan said, the village retained Kinley Horn to complete an evaluation of the traffic calming opportunities, looking at the traffic characteristics in the Kenilworth Gardens neighborhood. And with me tonight is my colleague, Peter Vita, who together with me performed the evaluation.
Good evening, everyone.
So first, the study area. This is kind of the broader look down from the village standpoint. You can see where the study area is, kind of in the general quadrant of, north of Lake Avenue and west of Ridge. And as we get a little bit closer, these streets highlighted, the east-west streets highlighted in blue, are the street segments that we focused on. Ridge Avenue or Ridge Road on the east, Hunter Avenue on the west, and then basically Beechwood, Kenilworth, Chestnut, Thornwood, Greenwood, and Elmwood were the 6 streets, with 21st Street there in the middle, kind of dividing it in half. So the first, let me first kind of highlight the traffic calming policy of the village. There's kind of 4 criteria, and this is a kind of a data-driven criteria established by the village some years ago to put together some thresholds for identifying when streets might be considered for traffic calming mitigation measures. It's not necessarily intended to be If you meet this criteria, you should have traffic calming. It's sort of an initial screening process. It's not a mandate at that point, similar to like a traffic signal or stop sign that you meet certain volume thresholds. You're not necessarily mandated, but at that point you should be starting to consider whether traffic calming measures are appropriate to address issues that may be present. So the first one is a volume threshold, looking at 1,200 vehicles per day on a local street. The second one looks at the 85th percentile speeds being 7 miles over the posted speed limit. The 85th percentile basically representing a large majority of traffic speeds on the street, not necessarily the top, occasional person that might drive really fast down the street once in a while, but the large majority of traffic that you typically would see on the street. Letter C is an excessive accident experience in a pattern that might relate to unreasonable speeds or volumes. And then D is kind of facts or circumstances that may not be captured in these criteria, but might have contributing factors that warrant some consideration by the commission to if A, B, and C are not really appropriate or tied to those reasons. So what data was collected? The village had, as Dan mentioned, the village has collected a range of traffic volume and speed data along these streets over the years. These were all collected pre-COVID, I would say, ranging from, I think the earliest was August of 2018. I'm sorry, May of 2017 through, I think, fall or spring of 2019 for most of these. And so what this one is this one looks at the volume. And so we look at the different segments and you can see it identifies the eastbound and the westbound volume directionally, and then you see the total. And the total is color coded. Green, you can see in the legend, green is basically less than the 1,200 vehicle per day threshold. Yellow is at the 12 to 1,300 vehicle day, so it's over the threshold, and red would be over 100 vehicles per day over the threshold. You can see that we had 3 segments, both segments of Elmwood Avenue between Hunter and Ridge, and then the eastern segment between 21st and Ridge on Greenwood were over the threshold of 1,200. But you can also see that the threshold is barely reached. So 1,205 on Greenwood, Elmwood ranged from 1,209 to 1,232. So we're talking a couple percentage points over. We're not looking at anything too egregious from a volume standpoint. You can see that most of these segments also have a pretty balanced eastbound and westbound distribution, except when you get down to Elmwood, you can see that in the segment on the eastern segment, a large majority of this, I think it was over 74% or something like that, is almost 899 eastbound versus 310 westbound. So it doesn't have that same balance that the other streets do. And when you look on the western segment, it skews towards the westbound direction. So it suggests that traffic is coming down 21st from the neighborhood and using Elmwood more to exit the neighborhood, either towards Hunter or towards Ridge. It was just an interesting characteristic to see in terms of the volume data. But none of the street segments are really, have this significant volume issue where they significantly increase the threshold. They're basically right at the threshold or below for the most part. The next one is the 85th percentile speeds. And so you can see these are similarly color coded. So again, the criteria is 7 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. And the speed limit on these segments is 25 miles per hour. So we're looking at anything that's within 0 to 32 miles per hour would be green, 32 to 34 would be yellow. And once we get over 34 miles per hour, we're just trying to identify, looking at the data, identifying different criteria that starts to raise more awareness. And you can see from these, most of these segments are green. Some segments have speeds that are at, I think we have only one that was, technically below the speed limit. If you look at Thornwood on westbound between 21st and Ridge, but most of these are kind of within the 5 mile per hour range. You start to get a couple that are just over at 33, 32, 33 miles per hour. And then you can see on Elmwood on the southern end, there are 3 of those 4 segments directionally at least have speeds that are over 34 miles per hour. And you can see they reach up to 39, which would basically represent a 14 mile per hour increase over the posted speed limit. So that's clearly an issue that I think we want to dig in a little bit further on. I mentioned the directional distribution on Elmwood and how we noticed that in terms of the volume, while it kind of is right near the threshold, it does have a different distribution than the other segments do. One of the other things that we've noticed just from observations is the driveway density. So, all these streets have a pretty significant number of driveways up and down the street, serving each of the residences along the adjacent properties. There is on-street parking, kind of, scattered out throughout the neighborhood. Most of the streets, they're about 25 or 26 feet wide. And so when you have someone parked on both sides of the street in particular, you can't have simultaneous two-way traffic. So that helps kind of meter some of the speeds, but we noticed, the mix of on-street parking wasn't quite as consistent on Elmwood on the south side in particular. With Mollenkrodt and Ronald Knox and some of the other uses that are more passive on the south side, there are fewer driveways and there's also less parking demand on the south side of Elmwood, which I think in a lot of ways feels like there's less friction as a driver going up and down Elmwood, and it kind of contributes to what we think is part of the reason for some of the higher speeds along Elmwood. So traffic calming measures. So the village also has some criteria for selecting measures, and I've outlined these here. The degree to which the problem is solved, we want to make sure that we're addressing the actual problem at hand, making sure that there's reasonable access for all. So that's, making sure that we're still serving emergency vehicles, service vehicles, access to private property and driveways. The safety implications of the action, making sure that whatever we're doing is still safe and maybe has other safety benefits. And then the last one, which I think is important, is looking at the extent of spillover problems. Basically, we don't want to solve one problem and then create other problems. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about those different characteristics as we're looking at potential measures. So in terms of the context and the process, this is a general outline of kind of our process and the evaluation. The first was we developed a sort of traffic calming toolbox, a matrix of such that looks at a range of different options, different scales, different levels of disruption, different levels of cost, and tried to then look at the benefits and the challenges and opportunities associated with each, and then starting to then put them in categories as to whether they were appropriate, whether they could be appropriate in certain circumstances, or whether they were just not appropriate for the context of the neighborhood. And then we worked through those ones that we felt were appropriate or could potentially be appropriate and started to fit them specifically in the neighborhood and understand whether they were solving the problem, whether they were safe, whether they could potentially create other problems, and how disruptive they may or may not be and how effective they may or may not be. So I'm going to walk you through that process. But first, I want to show just a couple examples of some traffic calming devices that are in play in Wilmette today. So speed humps and raised crosswalks are a common one. These are some photos of the one at Hunter and Thornwood. It's on the, I guess it's the south leg of this intersection. It's a raised crosswalk. You can see with the ramping up to and from the crosswalk. The next couple are the one on the left is on Thornwood Avenue. There's I think a pair of them that are just west of Harper Elementary School. This other one on the right is one of 5 along Manor Drive, north of Lake Avenue, a couple like a block or two west of Loyola Academy. So there's a series of 5 along Manor Drive. This one here is at 15th and Forest on the south leg of that intersection. I believe there's 2 or 3, maybe 3 along 15th Street. In this section, here's another example of a raised crosswalk in the community. Another option is edgeline markings. So the one on the left is Harper Avenue, just north of Thornwood. You can see the white markings on the side. This helps to visually narrow the road a little bit. It's about a 3-foot offset from the curb, but visually it helps you feel a little more hemmed in, a little more. It's a more passive approach to regulating some of the speeds. But that's an example in the community. And there's a lot of examples, obviously, of brick streets and other textured streets can also provide a traffic calming sense with the kind of the rumble and the tactile feel as you're driving. If you drive faster, you start to feel the rumbling in your tires and in your car, and it helps to regulate your speed, or at least helps you to acknowledge when you're maybe going too fast. So that's another example, maybe a somewhat passive example of traffic calming. So I'm going to run through these. I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but this is intended to show you, and this is in the report, but this is intended to show kind of the matrix or the toolbox of different traffic calming options that we looked at and filtered through. And then we looked at different benefits and challenges, some different considerations that are important with each different type, and then kind of labeled them with a green circle, yellow circle, or a red circle as to whether they were appropriate in kind of that initial screening process to carry forward. And we were evaluating different options. So we looked at things like medians, chicanes, pinch points, and bump outs as being appropriate options. Speed humps, there's precedent in the community, obviously, for that, and they're effective at helping to address speed. Edge lines and other markings could be effective. Vehicle speed feedback signs, it's something that could be effective in some cases. Bike lanes are something visually that help kind of reduce the effective width of the road and limit the area that vehicle traffic might travel in. Neighborhood traffic circles are another one that could potentially be effective. Roadway surface treatments, one example would be a brick street that we just talked about, could be appropriate in some locations. And then some of these others are really maybe not appropriate in this location, dealing with some of the radii of the corners, shared streets, wounders or shared streets, raised intersections, cul-de-sacs, traffic diverters. Those can be pretty invasive in terms of really limiting access and circulation through a neighborhood. And so the next step was taking some of those green and yellow circles and starting to look at them a little further. So here's just some examples I wanted to show. It's easier to kind of show these with imagery than rather try to describe them. On the left, that's an oval median. You can see it's in a residential neighborhood, and it kind of diverts traffic around it. The one on the right is actually in Wilmette. This is on Sterling, north of Isabella. So that's just east of Ridge, south of Wilmette Avenue. In that neighborhood, it's just like an L-shaped neighborhood, and you can see the median there kind of divides up the center line of the road. Chicanes is another example that helps vehicles kind of have to maneuver around and moderate the speed. So you can see these examples in residential neighborhoods. The one on the left is physically separated from the curb so you can maintain drainage. The one on the right is more of kind of built into the curb with the curb draining and stormwater draining around it. Just a couple ways to handle that. Pinch points or curb extensions. Some people also call them chokers. Helps to kind of, pinch points is pretty self-explained. It just kind of constricts the area that traffic has to drive through, and so it slows traffic down in that way. We did look at this in this case as well, and we thought this was one that we kind of carried forward as a possible option. Some of the other ones that we looked at and dismissed were these edge lines, surface treatments, vehicle speed, feedback signs, traffic circles, and bike lanes. So the edge lines and center lines we dismissed largely because the street really isn't wide enough that we need to kind of narrow it in several more feet if we also have on-street parking and two-way traffic. As it is, if there's parking, it starts to feel tighter. And if there's parking on both sides of the street, you can't pass in two directions simultaneously. Surface treatments have their place in the community. They're a little more passive, but they're also very expensive. And so that we didn't feel that was probably the best use to try to pursue on these streets at this time. Vehicle speed feedback signs can be effective in at least informing people when they're driving too fast, which sometimes is the issue. They just maybe aren't aware. However, in a neighborhood setting, a lot of times this isn't as effective because the drivers are regular, normal drivers that drive the streets every day, and the effectiveness of vehicle speed feedback signs pretty quickly wanes and is no longer effective after a little bit of time. Traffic circle is a very kind of acute situation, just focused at the intersection. Given the long kind of east to west dimensions, we have, I think, roughly 2,500 feet from east to west between Hunter and Ridge, that just a traffic circle would not have enough oomph for the value or bang for the buck at 21st Street to really effectively manage speeds up and down each of the streets that might be appropriate. And then last is bike lanes. Again, we don't really have the width for separate bike lanes. However, Elmwood is defined in the village's bike and, I forget the official title of it, bike and multimodal plan as a bike boulevard. So there are things, and that is included in our recommendations for sharrows, markings and signs that indicate this as a shared street in terms of vehicles and bicycles. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So in the recommended plan, we focused on the idea of pinch points or bump outs versus speed humps as being kind of the two most effective tools. Given the width of the street being about 25, 26 feet, if we were to do some bump outs or pinch points to moderate some of the traffic at certain points, we really don't have a lot of room to create those and still maintain two-way traffic at the same time. So we would have roughly 2 to 3 foot bump outs. So it's a lot of cost for not really getting a lot of really noticeable change in the curb line. And given the precedence of speed humps in the community, the lower cost of speed humps versus bump outs, we lean towards the recommendation of using speed humps. And so the recommended plan, based on the speeds that we were seeing that I talked about earlier, was focused on Elmwood Avenue. So speed humps along Elmwood Avenue, 4 speed humps, 2 on either side of 21st. So 2 between Hunter and 21st and 2 between 21st and Ridge. We wanted to try to divide up, each section is roughly 1,200 feet, give or take. So we wanted to try to divide these up evenly. So looking at 350 to 500 feet apart in terms of spacing. There's the Institute of Transportation Engineers has a good guideline for this. It's about 260 to 500 feet is the recommended range to space your speed humps to try to maintain an 85th percentile speeds within the 25 to 30 mile per hour range. So we wanted to try to stay consistent with that spacing on each of the blocks. And then we wanted to coordinate this with the bike boulevard designation for the village's recent master bike and active transportation plan. On the other streets within the study area, basically Greenwood going north, we want to monitor the traffic volumes and speeds after speed humps if they are to be installed on Elmwood. We want to monitor the speeds and volumes on those streets. We recommend a 3 to 6 month period afterwards so that traffic volumes and speeds and conditions kind of normalize. But if you go back to some of the criteria that we highlighted earlier, one of them is to basically, we don't want to solve one problem and create multiple other problems. So we want to, check to see, does traffic divert from Elmwood Avenue to any of the other streets? Does it put it over the threshold? If people are speeding and no longer speeding on Elmwood, but they start to use other alternates, we certainly don't want that. So I think we want to make sure that we're checking these other streets to make sure there aren't unintended consequences. And if there are, then we'll need to address those. And, if it is evident based on additional data collection, speed humps or potentially some other option might be appropriate for installation. So I'm almost done. The last couple slides, this is kind of a more zoomed in section you can see of Elmwood on the bottom. It's Hunter on the left and Ridge on the right. And then this is Greenwood on the top. So the yellow circles, and I realize the scale, this isn't great, and I'll zoom in a little bit more. The yellow circles represent the recommended locations for the speed humps, and the orange circles We just looked at one block as an example of what you would want to do if it was evident that other streets needed some traffic calming devices, some suggested locations of where those could go, and the thought process behind it. And I'll zoom in just to kind of get into that. So you can see this is going from Hunter, and then we'll move east towards Ridge. And I have a little note here on basis of placement. So I mentioned earlier the 260 to 500 foot guideline. I think we were able to divide these relatively equally and try to stay in roughly I think we ended up between 350 and like 490 feet for our spacing, either between the adjacent intersection or an adjacent speed hump in each of these locations. We also looked at the driveways. I mentioned earlier that each of these streets, particularly the ones from Greenwood going north, are on both sides full of residential driveways, whereas on Elmwood, we don't have quite as many driveways on the south side. We have some larger properties, some institutional uses, the park, and so forth. And so it's a little easier to place them in that location, but we did not want to place a speed hump obviously in line with the driveway, and we wanted to give ourselves a little bit of distance so that a vehicle could back out of the driveway without backing onto the speed hump. So these are suggested locations. I think that if this was to go forward, we want to make sure that they get a little, verified to make sure that everything's right in the right place. But we wanted to locate these roughly meeting the spacing guidelines and avoiding maneuvers to and from driveways. You can see we have spacing of about 400 to 420 feet on Elmwood between 21st and Hunter. And this western one would be just east of this circle driveway. And then the next one puts us kind of between the two intersections here. And then as we get to the east half of the corridor, just east of the Ronald Knox driveway, avoiding some of the residential driveways on the north. And then again, while still adjacent to the park, before we get to the Mollenkrodt Park parking lot area. And then we have similar spacing kind of on the north side. I think here's where we're a little bit closer, 340 to 490 feet. And this was a little tougher to try to fit these between driveways because they're not necessarily lined up, they're staggered, and there's quite a few of them. So this is the approach in terms of the speed hump placement. With that, I think I know I kind of covered a lot of stuff, and I'm sure you guys have questions about other options or what we went through the evaluation. I'm happy to try to answer any of those that you might have.
Thanks, Peter.
Do you want me to? Should I stop sharing? Is it worth pulling up for reference, or what do you guys prefer?
I have it up on my computer as well, so I'd say you could stop sharing unless there's a specific question about it.
Okay. I'll do that. Yeah, I can always pull it back up.
Yeah. So thank you. That was very informative. I first would like to open it up for questions and discussions by the commissioners. Does anyone have comments or discussions on questions on it?
I could start. First, I just want to say I appreciate both the public comment and the presentation. I think really, it's obviously great to have the public's input, and I think the presentation, it's very easy to follow, the way you laid it out and brought us through it. So thank you for that. And the nature of the problem, I'm familiar with this area. My son actually used to attend the Ronald Knox, so I know that street very well. Sure. The biggest questions I have are, I'm really concerned about the last point where we're worrying about offsetting the problem. And so when I look at the numbers for the Greenwood, we got one that's over the volume. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my iPad with the presentation here.
Sure.
We've got one with speed, and we've got another volume that's just under. It's 1143. So it's another day maybe it would have been over 12. And so I guess I'm just concerned that maybe I mean, I don't want to be too presumptive, but it seems like there's a very high chance that if we put these in on Elmwood, that it may displace there. I mean, that seems logical to me. So that's one point. I also had a question. I think we only have data for part of Chestnut. did you touch on that? And maybe I missed that, or what was that? So I'd like to know about that. And then the last thing that, of course, is just, I'm thinking the speed humps are better for the, not that this is necessarily your area, but for our proposed bike plan than the pinch points. But could someone, maybe Bridget could comment on that, or Dan, or, I'm not sure, but my gut says that that's better for bike layout. And since that is something we're also dealing with, if someone could comment on that. So.
Sure, I can take a first shot, and then Bridget and Dan, if you guys want to elaborate on any of those. So I think on Greenwood, yeah, we're close to the threshold in terms of the volume on the western segment. Again, yeah, and if you were to count different days, you might get some fluctuation here or there. And I guess that's also a little bit how I would approach the volume threshold. And from a traffic calming standpoint on volumes, you want to make sure as a residential street, you're having residential scale of traffic, that you're not having, the streets used as big through streets or, obviously cut through and things like that. And, you do have school to the west and you have different things going on. But, the point is that we're not having this as, you don't want like Lake Avenue traffic, obviously, going through these. And it's not to say that there aren't people that ever use these streets to continue west, to say to get over to Illinois and then curl up towards the Edens. I know some people say people do that. We don't have origin destination data, so we don't know exactly the traffic patterns like that. So I won't say that doesn't happen. I'm sure it does to some degree, but these volumes are all generally in scale with a residential street. And so I think what would concern me if I saw volumes instead of 1,200, but I saw 1,500 or 2,000 or things like that. That's where I would start to really get worried. Or if I saw, we do have some offset, like some uneven distribution on Elmwood, where it's almost like it's going to 21st and then going out. But if we saw, say, a significant eastbound or westbound volume on one or two of these streets, but not a similar eastbound volume, I might wonder, okay, are we getting a lot of people coming down Ridge, going west, and then cutting down Hunter or something as a part of a normal morning pattern to get out to the Edens? And we didn't really see that. Not to say that people don't ever do it, but it's not of the scale that I think would worry me from a volume standpoint. On the speed standpoint, I think clearly you see that Elmwood has some outliers that are considerably more than the posted speed limit when we're talking, 14 miles per hour over the speed limit versus others that are, close to the threshold, the 7 mile per hour threshold. And those are I think those are ones that we want to keep an eye on and check, and whether there's, certain enforcement issues or just kind of see if that's, more of a pattern that continues over time. In terms of the Chestnut thing, I think that was one where we didn't have the historical data from earlier. So that was one that was, I think, a segment that was collected, if I have my notes right, in October, this past October. We wanted to make sure it was when schools were, because I think we wanted to make sure when schools were kind of getting back and people were attending, it was more normal, start to get a feel for what kind of activity was going on there. So that's why I think we just, and again, it's hard with the way that you, and maybe Dan can elaborate on this, but the way that the data is collected, you kind of want to, with all the different driveways there, the sensors that pick up the volume and the speed, you tend to want to have it where you're not having people just starting out, out of their driveway and having that influence the speed and the volume data. So there's a lot of driveways where people are coming and going, along the block. So that kind of impacts the placement. I think the other thing that you mentioned was speed humps and the preference for speed humps. You hit a good point there in terms of the speed hump on a bike boulevard. We talked about this and the shape. There are different shapes that you can do. You can have a more sinusoidal profile of the speed hump, so that closer to the edges, it's more flat, so that bicyclists who are riding more along the curb aren't going to necessarily hit the grade. Generally, with a speed hump, it's also the type of bicyclist that you're going to impact. The people that are out there with the really expensive road bikes and all the gear, they're probably not using this route as their main bike route necessarily. But the people who are, running errands and exercise, and the more casual cyclists, providing a good clean riding surface for them where they're not hitting the bumps and things like that. I think there's ways to manage that in terms of its profile.
I have one question, and maybe city staff can or village staff can answer it. Is there a reason why Hunter Avenue was not included in this study?
Hunter was evaluated at a previous study years ago, and traffic calming treatments were applied in the form of the edge lines. And then there's also the raised crosswalk that Peter had shown earlier. So this is more a neighborhood study of the east-west residential streets. Hunter is a collector street with a higher volume and a higher posted speed limit.
And if I could add to that, Commissioner Kibiti, one of the sensitivities we have is public safety response times. And because Hunter is a collector road that does gather traffic from that neighborhood, speed humps wouldn't necessarily be appropriate there because of, slowing emergency vehicles down. So I think we did look at it, but it's not a good fit on Hunter.
Along those same lines, what about north to south traffic on 21st? How does that influence this? Or if there's movement up and down that, is that something that should also be calmed? It's just a question.
The village hasn't received the complaints like we have for the east-west streets. The data that I could find on 21st Street was from nearly 10 years ago, and the volumes were only about 400 to 500 cars per day. So nowhere near the threshold for volume, and the speeds were also low. They were below 30 miles per hour, 85th percentile speeds.
Okay, I guess I was asking, maybe this doesn't make sense, but it's more in terms of deterring that as the person that's so inclined to make that trip would having those stops along there stop them from even bothering to go down that way. But maybe that doesn't make sense though.
Yep. My understanding, we didn't look at stop control as part of this evaluation on those cross streets.
Hey, Dan, can you talk to how is a neighborhood actually initially chosen for evaluation for a calming study?
We discussed traffic calming candidates at a commission meeting back in 2019, and we noted that Elmwood had qualified or had meet the thresholds in 2 of the criteria. Same as Greenwood was very close, and there were residents that came out to that meeting in support of further study. So we had budgeted in 2020 to complete the traffic calming study, which we're just finishing up here at the beginning of 2021.
You play the long game. Okay, that's good. And then one other question. So what kind of speed humps are we talking about? In the presentation, there was images of the kind of basically a raised crosswalk that's across Hunter. Are we talking something like that, or are we talking like the ones that bottom your car out on Kenilworth type speed humps? What kind are we talking about?
So I would say there's some different speed hump profiles, but they generally they kind of are sort of parabolic. So they in the middle, they kind of reach about 3 to 3.5 inches. That's usually like a typical speed hump. So, the idea is that you can drive over a speed hump, say going, 15, 20, 25 miles per hour and not have not feel it too much. But when you're going really slow, you'll start to feel it if you're just starting out, and obviously if you're going faster, So if you're kind of operating just below the speed limit, you're not gonna feel it too much. But if you're operating considerably faster, then you're going to start, you're going to maybe bottom your car out, but you should not be doing that when you're going at a normal, speed like that. So sometimes you can have raised crosswalks that are a little bit higher and are more flush with your curb. And so in that case, if you do go with that kind of design, you're usually not wanting to have anything steeper than a 5% incline, approaching the crosswalk with like the raised crosswalk. So that with the 6-inch curb, for example, that gets you at roughly like a 10-foot ramp on either side. So that's kind of the design of a larger raised crosswalk. I think the ones that you go out there now, they're not that severe. They're more like the 3 to 3.5 inch height speed humps.
I wanted to touch base, Peter. I don't know if it's Dan or Bridget. You talked about the historical data. Can you just explain the data collection methodology for the study? Because I don't recall seeing that in there. Was it a single day? Was it a 48-hour count? Was it two? That was a question in one of the public comments I saw too. So I'd just like to understand if there were multiple counts in one location or if it was just spread throughout.
The duration for each data collection effort was a 3-day period. We collect data between Tuesdays through Thursday. That's most representative of a normal day. So it's a 72-hour period. We often see, more abnormal traffic patterns on like Mondays and Fridays. The studies were conducted at varying months and varying years, as you can see from the table. Just as requests came in to evaluate speeding, we put out the counters, and we try to target months when school's in session and trying to avoid any holidays or any other abnormal times.
Thank you.
I believe most of the counts were collected in the months of May, September, October, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what, but by being those months and being a 72-hour, these weren't just like single day anomalies. These were
right.
3
Right.
day.
Yeah.
That's what I just wanted to make sure. Any other questions, thoughts from the commissioners before I open it up to public comment?
This is Ben. Just had a couple quick questions. One was, and I'd seen a couple residents make this comment, that the width of the streets might be different. Can you confirm that they're similar or the same between Elmwood, Greenwood, up going north?
I believe they're similar. I don't know that they're all exactly the same. I think we were usually measuring face of curb to face of curb, and we were right around 25 or 26 feet on those. Is that right, Peter? I think that's kind of where we were landing on those. I don't think there was a lot of variation between those.
Yeah, so a foot or maybe two variation between the streets. It sounds like it might be less than that. So okay.
Right, and when you've got on-street parking, like I would say a typical parallel parking space is going to be 7 to 8 feet. So if you had, let's just say you had, two vehicles parked kind of in the same vicinity where they weren't staggered too much, then you're that's like 16 feet or so right there. So you're down to like roughly 10 foot, which is a somewhat narrow travel lane. Most travel lanes are going to be 10 to 12. So you can't handle the two-way traffic at that point, even if you have it on one side. So in a lot of ways, the on-street parking is a good kind of traffic calming measure, and so I think that's part of the reason we see some of these higher speeds on Elmwood. We tend not to see as much on-street parking along the south side because you don't have as many residences along the south side of Elmwood, more passive uses. Not that there isn't ever on-street parking there, but it's more sporadic. And so you have a more open, straight shot if you're going, towards Ridge, and not as much friction or kind of horizontal obstruction where you feel like, people tend to drive as fast as they feel comfortable doing. So if you're not, feeling a little pinched in, hemmed in by, parked cars, and it's a wide open street, then you're going to tend to probably drive a little faster.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think the other question I had was, do we know historically, have we done any studies or there have been complaints, in the past over Elmwood? And the reason why I ask is just to make sure we're isolating whether there's not some other problem that's, caused this, created more volume or increased, speed over time, or is it maybe just a similar dynamic and just, more people are focused on it, or again, maybe there is more traffic, now versus in previous years.
I don't know historically if this is something that's been kind of consistent. I think what you're asking is, this been consistent over time, or is it a new characteristic? Is that
Yeah, and we may not know the answer. I'm just trying.
Yeah, I don't
check the
know.
box. Right.
Yeah,
When I looked at the 2011 data, the uneven distribution on Elmwood was still present. The volumes were a little bit higher. The speeds were still over the threshold. So it is fairly consistent. That data was collected in November, so maybe that explains the higher volume. It was, touching closer to, 1,300, but that uneven distribution was still present, and the speeds were elevated.
Got it. And did it not progress to this point where, enough residents are, voicing their concerns, and there's no vote to add anything or do additional measures at the time?
There was a period of time where traffic calming was not funded in the village budget.
Right.
And I believe that began to be funded again in 2019. And we used that money to purchase the speed radar feedback signs. And then subsequently, we funded this study.
Right. Right. No, I saw the 08, reduction of funding or emphasis on it. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
So Dan, this is the first location since the village has restarted funding calming. This is the first neighborhood location.
Correct.
And then I just want to touch on, because again, there were some public comments noting crash history is, there's no significant known crash history in these locations. I think we have the police. We have Officer Murphy, Chief Murphy here. Is there anything from that perspective that we need to be aware of or consider as part of this study?
Yeah, we pulled up data for the last 5 years on those streets, and for the last 5 years, zero crashes on Elmwood. You had 4 on Greenwood over that 5-year span, and 1 on Thornwood. All minor property damage only accidents. Most of the ones on Greenwood were, I shouldn't say most, 2 of them were side swipes of parked vehicles, which goes to what Mr. Lemon was saying as far as it being more parked up on the north and south sides of the street, a narrow gap.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I agree with that. Thought of where there's the parking on both sides. Typically you wouldn't have as excessive of speeding. So, personally, I guess my comment that I think is really well evaluated and logical approach, and the results make a lot of sense, and the recommendations do as well to me. So, and yeah, I'll just invite any other commissioner comments before I open it up to public.
I just had a quick question. There may be a couple of questions on the challenges issue in their evaluations or their analytics. The potential adverse impacts to emergency vehicle response times. It's going to slow down ambulances and fire trucks, whatever, and police. And the other potential maintenance issues with snowplows. Do we have any data on that? I know we have speed humps in other places in Wilmette. Do we have any data on what those effects have been over past years? And what is the potential upkeep cost if plows keep running over these things and breaking them up and doing damage to them?
I'll jump in on the operation and maintenance impacts to Public Works. I don't believe that the plow damage has been as significant as the cost to maintain the striping that we have to put in advance of the speed humps. So there is this minor impact to the maintenance budget for pavement marking because we'd want to keep those fresh. So when officers and snowplows drive, and residents when they drive down the street, that the pavement marking is prominent so they know that they're coming and they're aware of them. As far as the public safety response, Chief Murphy might have a comment on this, but at the time when the Transportation Commission developed the original traffic calming policy, it was in conjunction with the police and fire chiefs at the time, and that's why they were very concerned about collector streets and streets that carry high volume, that we not put in traffic calming measures that slowed them down. But on local residential streets, they were fine with it at the time, and I presume still they're still able to make their routes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, I think if there's no other questions, then I will open it up to public comment. I just want to remind everyone that the commission did receive and review all of the written comments that were submitted. So if you submitted a comment, that has been reviewed, and you're welcome to comment, but you don't need to reiterate that has been provided. For those attending via Teams, please let attendees know that you will be I'm going to be making a list of those interested in making a comment and calling on you one by one. And then before you comment, remember to unmute yourself. If you are on a telephone line, you can do that by pushing *6. And then if you do make a comment, please state your name and home address before making your comment. So I'm not really sure how to see if someone has a comment. If you can, is there a way to raise your hand or somehow so that I can get a list of who wants to comment? All right, maybe we don't have a long list of people. Oh, okay. I have, I'm seeing one hand raised. So I'll call on David Ham.
Hello, this is Dave.
Hi.
Hi, I'm at 2224 Thornwood.
Okay.
And I had submitted a comment. I won't repeat that. I just had one other comment to make. So thank you so much. I mean, that was a very clear presentation and easy to follow and good questions. So thanks everybody for your time and thoughts on this. I think, you know, when you run through the different criteria, you know, you had A, B, C, D being kind of the other. I mean, to me, kind of the other one to consider is the number of people. I mean, the speeding in and of itself, I don't think is necessarily the issue. It's speeding in the presence of pedestrians or causing accidents. And if you just look at the number of kids on, so I live on Thornwood, and Mr. Lemon had mentioned the point where you've got a lot of the parking on both sides of the street. And so I think you don't have the crazy rates of speed, but with little kids, the drivers can't see them and the kids can't see the cars or can't see around the cars. And that's I think the concern that we have often on Thornwood, I'm sure on some of the other streets. I have a 6-year-old and her friend is right across the street, and it's a similar situation all up and down the block of kids wanting to go across the street, and versus, and it's obviously it's not a competition across the different streets here, but you know, if you look at in Elmwood, I mean, there aren't really any residences or anything on the south side of the street. It's you got a park and a school. So it's just something else. Is that something that gets factored into this in any way?
Do you want Dan and Bridget? I can take a initial shot at it. I think, yeah, it could be factored into it. I think, you know, we try to have it as data driven as possible, but always leave kind of that option for, you know, circumstances that aren't covered in the data, you know, that might be apparent. And I don't disagree, I understand the concern, and whether it's maybe not as, you know, if it's the speed issue or not. I think when you're talking about kids, it's obviously, you know, they're a vulnerable user as a pedestrian. So, you know, it seems to me that it sounds like a safety concern that kind of relates to sight lines. So if they're coming out, like say by the driveway and cars are parked close to the driveway, maybe there's not good sight lines of them or for them by the drivers, and that's always a concern. And it's kind of a little bit of a double-edged sword, because I think if you were to limit the parking, then you might start to see your speeds increase. And so that's like, I could say, one option could be to limit parking to one side of the street, so that you have some parking, but you still have some sight lines from when you're crossing from one side of the street, and you might have higher traffic speeds. So, which is I think something everyone would agree they don't want either. So the data that we had doesn't show that it's a significant consistent speeding issue. That's not to say that someone doesn't ever go fast down the block every once in a while. But I think when you look at it kind of in the sense of those different kind of data points, it's, it doesn't really seem to warrant it. Although I'm not trying to minimize the concern. I completely understand. The block I live on has several kids too, and I kind of worry about them sometimes when they're running across the street and things like that. But it's not one of those things where I think speed humps would necessarily address the line of sight issue. I think the speed humps or chicanes or some of those other things would might help address speeds, which doesn't seem to be the big issue. But I think it sounds like from what you're saying, it's more of a sight line issue. Is that an accurate way of putting it?
I think it's the two together. So
yeah,
you've got a whole lot of kids.
Yeah.
You've got parking on both sides of the street, and then you've got 15% of your cars going more than 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, shooting down the block. And I mean, I've been there 8 years now, or this will be my 8th summer. As soon as we get outside, inevitably every couple of weeks, I'm in a conversation with somebody unsolicited saying we really need to do something about the speeding on the street. And then every couple of years, somebody gets up the energy to approach you guys. And I'm sure, Dan, you've been contacted a few times by my neighbors.
Yeah.
So the big concern when we saw the note, I think, is that if we do something in Elmwood, it's just going to make the situation, not only are we not doing something on Thornwood, but then we're going to make it even worse. So, which is what I put in my note. So.
Yeah, and I think, and that's certainly something I think that we're all would be, want to be wary of. So if it's, if this were to move forward and speed humps were installed on Elmwood, I think we'd certainly want to look at, collecting some speed and volume data to check to see, not just do they go up and over the thresholds, but do we see increases, just in general in terms of volume on Greenwood and Thornwood. I think those would be the two probably most, related to any diversion of traffic from Elmwood. And also on the speed side, and maybe there's something that could be done looking at, in particular, certain times of year too. If there's, I think we try to look at it when school's in session, but you mentioned like in the summertime, kids are home more during the day and doing more things outside. Maybe it's worth kind of checking to see if there's any variation in speed data in the summertime versus school, during the day when and times when more people are at work, but in the summer more people are at home, and maybe things are a little different, and that might be worth looking at to see if there's any variation there in terms of collecting additional data going forward.
Mr. Ham, we'd be happy to schedule the portable speed feedback signs as well, just to bring awareness to drivers.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in learning more about that.
Yep, Bridget, are you able to identify how those are deployed? And I know Peter mentioned earlier that, which I think is a really good point, that permanent installation isn't necessarily always effective, but occasional installation. So how are those deployed and rotated around the village?
I'll let Dan respond to that.
Yeah, we maintain a list of speeding concerns or requests for action related to speeding, and then we'll rotate the 2 pairs of signs that we have around the village. We'll deploy them for several weeks at a time. Often we'll deploy them the first week in stealth mode, where they're not providing any speed feedback and we're just collecting data, and then we'll turn on the speeds and have them do speed feedback for a 1 to 2 week period after they've been in stealth mode. And we're seeing varying rates of success with the signs. Sometimes we see a noticeable decrease, and others there isn't, and that can be a function of various factors. Whether the cars were parked on the street at the time it was in stealth mode versus when they were the speeds were being displayed, and then we'll just rotate those through the village throughout the year.
I think that would be maybe a note from this meeting, and then to just make sure that Thornwood is included on that rotation list, specifically in the summer months.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ham. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Oh. Does anyone else, or are there any other comments that need to be submitted, stated?
We do have some YouTube comments. If you'd like me to read those.
Yes, could you please?
Okay. Marcel says, did you track the number of cars that did not stop at the stop sign at Elmwood and 21st?
That's data that we did not collect. We didn't do any enforcement collection for intersection compliance.
And then Charles Janwer asks, have speed cameras been considered?
I don't know, Dan, if you want me to take that. We haven't considered speed cameras or like speed enforcement in terms of like camera enforcement of speed limits. Or I'm assuming that's where we're getting at, is from an enforcement standpoint rather than the data collection standpoint. I think the speed feedback signs are things that can collect data, but I think what he's probably getting at is enforcement. I would say that's, I think that's something that, I mean, obviously City of Chicago is getting into that, in or adjacent to parks and around schools. I'm not aware of too many people actually putting that up in a residential neighborhood. I don't know if that's something that someone from the village, in terms of like from the police, would want to, whether that's something that other enforcement measures that are kind of routinely taken, or anything in this neighborhood historically.
Yeah, I don't think we've entertained speed cameras in the village. There's a negative connotation with that as far as it just being a revenue source. I think it's one of the major criticisms of that product. If there are speed concerns, from the community, we wind up doing traffic service safety surveys, which include having officers in those areas if it's during specific time frames, in those specific time frames, and conducting enforcement activities. Based on the Transportation Commission meeting back in 2019 that sparked this conversation, the residents that had spoke up at that meeting were primarily from Greenwood, and we had conducted over 15 separate traffic safety surveys on that street, resulting in only 2 violations, one warning and 1 citation issued. But that could be activities that could clearly be considered on Elmwood in the future.
Okay. And then Charles also did say he, I agree with Marcel that cars not stopping at the 21st and Elmwood stop signs is concerned. And then the last comment we have on YouTube, Bill Pickrell says, to what extent is demographic data considered when evaluating traffic calming measures? There are a lot of families with young children in Kenilworth Gardens. That fact, combined with above average speeds on Greenwood between Ridge and 21st, for example, and cars parking on both sides of the streets can create dangerous situations.
Yeah, I think that's consistent with what Mr. Ham's comments were about, the concern of mix of, speeds and children. So I think, kind of trying to understand the speeds and maybe some, the speed feedback signs might be something temporarily to help kind of control and manage that. And I think being cognizant of that going forward with, this, if this were to move forward with some speed humps on Elmwood, is understanding kind of what, if there are implications on Greenwood and whether it makes sense to look at some speed humps there as well.
Can I respond to that also? I think part of, we have to look at why people might speed on a street, and they don't speed on the street because there's kids or families on it. They speed on a street because the geometry of the road is inviting for them to speed on a street. And that's the whole purpose of traffic calming, is to create a permanent measure in the roadway to slow those cars down. So I think, as we said, it's something to consider, but it's not necessarily driving the need for the traffic calming measure. So that's why the traffic calming policy is very focused on data and engineering information, so that we make the right choice when we implement them.
Okay. And then I think the only other thing we had was there's a couple of comments in the Teams chat. There's not a name with it, but it says, hello, I own a truck and speed humps are not very effective for SUVs and many high performance sedans that cruise the neighborhood. Elmwood is historically known cut through Hunter north to the eastbound streets to our known routes to avoid Lake and Ridge. And that says oops, eastbound streets to Ridge. And then it says edge lines do not exist. I don't know if they're referring to maybe Hunter.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So, I mean, that's, yeah. I mean, we had a photo of the edge lines on Hunter. I know they kind of exist in certain areas. In terms of Elmwood as the cut through, I mean, I could see that to some point, and that could be explained maybe in some of the speeds that people are trying to make up for that time. And I think that's partly why we think, the speed humps on Elmwood would be a good solution to try to moderate and disincentivize using that street as a quicker cut through. There were a couple comments too about stop signs. And whether people are stopping at the stop signs. I know that's kind of an enforcement thing. It's hard to, the stop sign is more of a regulatory sign. It assigns right of way to people. The stop signs are not really a traffic calming device. And, Bridget and Dan and I have talked to other residents in the neighborhoods in the past that have asked for stop signs, to help slow down traffic and things like that. And if there's not enough traffic volume, or if people are commonly coming up to stop signs and there's never other traffic there, you start after a while wondering, why am I stopping at the stop sign? There's never anyone to stop or yield to. So they start rolling through, or they just ignore it blatantly and things like that. So I think, that just kind of goes to show if there are issues where people are rolling through stop signs on Elmwood, they're trying to get through there quicker. And that just kind of points the finger as to why we want to try to slow traffic down a little bit more on Elmwood. And it kind of goes hand in hand with some of the speed volumes that we're seeing, where we're seeing not speeds that are, just over the 7 mile per hour threshold, but more than double that threshold over the posted speed limit. So I think those comments are pretty consistent with, I think, the recommendations in this plan.
Is that all?
Do you think the speed humps would actually kind of neutralize some of the rolling through stop signs in your experience, or is it kind of a mixed bag? I mean,
yeah,
I can kind of see both ways, but curious if you've noticed anything in your experience.
Well, you mean like whether someone, now that you have speed humps, it kind of you know,
Are people more likely to, blow through stop signs because they want to
Yeah.
make up ground, or vice versa, just because they're going slower, maybe they're more likely to see the stop sign and stop. You know what I mean? I can kind of
Sure.
see it both ways.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things with unwarranted stop signs is, people, if you do decide to actually stop at them and you're tired and you're not going to roll through them, people do tend to make up for lost time, for that they spend stopping in their minds needlessly. And so I think, what the speed humps could do is, that's usually within kind of that 300-foot range where, you might start to accelerate. And if we have these speed humps, in a couple places on either side of 21st, that might help to also regulate, that you can't really make up for lost time the way that you used to. And so, I think, maybe it makes sense to kind of, make sure that that's enforced, a little bit if that is a thing that continues to maybe be a problem. But I think it also helps to disincentivize Elmwood as a an attractive option to make up. And, instead of going east on Lake and trying to go north on Ridge, might as well wait and take your turn at the signal, and rather than trying to cut through the neighborhood, if that is what some people are doing. And it may not be people cutting through. It could just be people from the neighborhood more to the west that are going to the east and vice versa. There's kind of, I think it's a little bit anecdotal, but there's always the kind of this adage of, the people, if you have a speeding problem in your neighborhood, a lot of the times it's your neighbors who are speeding. So, keep an eye on the folks that you do see kind of cutting quick through your neighborhood, and see if you recognize those vehicles.
Got it. Thanks.
So I've got a question kind of on a different line, back on when we were talking about the actual data collection. It makes sense to me why we wouldn't want to collect on a holiday or something that's very atypical, but I'm not sure I totally understand the logic of sort of not looking at a Monday or a Friday, since that happens every week. If there is some atypical behavior on Fridays, I feel like just for example, say that happens to be the day that there's more volume or more traffic, speed, something, I would think that'd be reoccurring enough that we would want to at least potentially grab that data. Or is there some logic that we think that there's less volume and less speed on Mondays and Fridays or something that would, I'm not sure I quite follow that.
Sometimes it's, holiday related stuff, or people taking longer, leaving early and taking like longer weekends. So you might have different kind of uncomparable, you may not want to compare a Friday traffic to a Thursday or Wednesday traffic. Also, I think there's a little bit of the kind of traditional people who kind of maybe head out of town or are doing things, Monday morning to fly for, when people used to travel for work. People would do that in the Monday mornings and they come back on Fridays and things like that. You tend to get a different traffic profile on Mondays and Fridays over the course of the day than you do on the Tuesday through Thursday. So to kind of compare them, it'd be one thing if you maybe were comparing Fridays to other Fridays, but comparing Fridays to other days is where you start to get some differences in your data, probably.
Well, I guess so. The question is, the village criteria doesn't specify, like, does it drive you to use Tuesdays or Thursdays?
I would say that's just kind of a general best practices, not just doing daily traffic counts, but like if we were doing intersection counts, trying to look at the details of an intersection operations, we'd look at peak hours on Tuesdays through Thursdays. Most jurisdictions, if we were to collect traffic counts on Mondays or Fridays, wouldn't accept the data because it's usually too different from typical conditions. So I would say that's really more of a best practices situation. That's not to say that in some locations looking at a Friday traffic might make sense, depending on the context of what you're studying. I guess
it feels like what we're most interested in is the sort of extreme. The average doesn't matter quite so much in this. I mean, again, I don't want to talk about some once in a year day or something, but if it's reoccurring, like if Monday happens to be, because people are traveling, like you're saying, which makes sense to me. What if that data is that's the day everyone, like maybe somehow we went back, we found out, well, a lot of these community members are noticing on Mondays, that's the day when they see someone fly by, and we're not really capturing that. I mean, I'm not trying to say that we should throw it all Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I just feel like it feels like we may be missing something.
I would just offer on that too that the policy does reference in procedure number 2 that the volumes and speed should be collected over several days, preferably a full week, to reveal temporal cycles and at appropriate times of day and season when problems are known to occur. From my personal perspective, I completely agree with the Tuesday through Thursday. It is industry standard. It is 100% accepted, and typically, for the same reason we designed to the 85th percentile speed and not the 99th percentile speed, like you don't typically design for the anomaly. I'm sure Peter could tell you that, but since I've designed a few roads myself, I can say, that's where, I completely see what you're saying and agree with that. And that's where I think that those types of situations, or when you look at special events, sometimes you would take account on a Saturday afternoon if there's something that's going on there, but you wouldn't necessarily install like a traffic signal or a major feature for an anomaly, or a single point situation. So I feel like that was one of the reasons I really wanted to know and was pleased to hear that it was a 3-day count, because I feel that that's an appropriate representation that is in accordance with the policy. And I just note with Bridges was kind of just looking to make sure that the evaluation was done in accordance with the policy and the data-driven approach, which I think is a really valuable approach for the village. So I don't know if you want to add on to that, anyone else?
No, that was well said.
Okay, so if there's any other, I just wanted to sort of recap of what I've heard and then give an opportunity in case it seems like we're missing anything. It sounds.
Sorry. Sorry, this is Dave Ham. I put my hand up one more time. Sorry, I'll make it quick. I know it's getting late.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No
I guess I thought that was up from before. So.
Yeah, sorry. No, I get the point. I was just it's the point I was making earlier, but I think just another way to think. It seems to me in some comments I was hearing recently, we're trying to solve speed, and to me the objective is really to manage risk. And like I would argue, going eastbound on Elmwood at 40 miles an hour is relatively safe. Going 30 miles an hour on some of these other streets where you've got cars on both sides of the road is riskier. I know we've got the same speed limit everywhere, but I would argue, they should be going slower on some of the other streets. So just something to think about, I guess, in the mix here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, for that comment. Okay, lots of feedback to consider for the commission. So I think the next step would be to address what the next steps are for the commission. I believe at this meeting, the intention is to have the commission provide either I'm looking for the right.
Chair Hayes, we don't need a motion necessarily. If there's concurrence to move forward with the plan that was presented tonight, we can take it to the next step, which is to send a letter to the neighbors.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was what I was looking for, is if we need an official motion. So, I mean,
could I ask a clarification question on that specific step? What neighbors vote on this or submit, that go into the 60%? Is it Elmwood? Is it Greenwood? Do folks on Lake who technically may be impacted by this? Do they get this? Who gets? Who rolls into this?
The residents on Elmwood. It's 1 vote per household on the block affected.
Got it. Okay.
Can we clarify the basic intent is to I think to move ahead with the traffic calming in the form of these speed humps on Elmwood, and then I believe we're also approving to do some immediate follow-up traffic counts and speed on Greenwood, and then should we build in some kind of a what's our threshold to say, okay, let's get back together if in fact the Greenwood data starts showing, then maybe we want to revisit that and move ahead on traffic calming on there.
Well, I don't know if Dan or Bridget, you want to address that. I can note on my understanding of it.
Commissioner Gates, are you thinking more after the traffic calming is implemented to keep an eye on Greenwood? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was in the Kimberly Horn documentation, was that they recommended that we do that, and I definitely agree. I think that's critical. I'm just saying that I guess I would say, in my mind, it should essentially be if we see any significant increase in I would think the volume numbers or the speed numbers on Greenwood, I'd like to know. I mean, obviously you take your time. I mean, it's going to be the first day that you get 1 day over, but I mean, after you've collected enough data, I think that on the other hand, if we don't see a significant increase, I don't think we necessarily need to immediately meet again on it.
Yeah, I think we can share the results of the data regardless.
Yeah.
Just to provide you a summary of the results. And if there's concerns, then we can discuss whether a meeting is necessary or not.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe this is what you're talking about, Dan, but according to the traffic calming policy, we will report back to the commission the post-implementation results of the study. And that will include an evaluation of Greenwood as well. To see
okay. Excellent. Perfect.
Yeah, and I think, what's the recommendation from that, Peter? Maybe at least 6 months, or?
I think we said 3 to 6 months, but I think that gives some leeway, kind of depending on when the speed humps would be installed. Like, you want to do it maybe more in the spring or fall, depending. And so obviously if you put them in the fall, you might want to wait till late spring or something like that. So it's possible it goes a little over 6 months, depending on seasonality, and you want to make sure you're getting good time for the data. So I don't mean for it to be so prescriptive of 3 to 6 months exactly, but let it normalize, and people make sure they get used to and are aware that the speed humps are there.
And Peter, I believe you noted in the early part of the report, but it wasn't noted in the recommendation for the timing of the recounts, but there is at least a perceived COVID impact. There was something noted of a 20 to 25% reduction. I know industry-wide, there's, obviously some impacts to traffic counts. So I would just also note that we would need to be at some level of comfort with traffic, what is normal traffic,
right? Whatever
our new normal ends up being, before we would want those counts too. So, but I think there's time to do that.
I think there's time, and you could look at some other, if you were to do a spot count or two, around nearby, you can kind of understand relative to historic counts. Obviously, you wouldn't maybe want to look at, well, what is the before and after count here, because it might be because of the speed humps, right? So you want to get a control point, and then, and obviously other kind of considerations of what's going on in town. Does it look and feel more normal, or, are there other circumstances, right?
So, along those lines, do we want to do another round of counts on Elmwood whenever this new normal is normal? Because I see that the last count was in 2017, and we are seeing some slowdown in traffic, and some of it could be permanent. So I don't know if the slowdown could potentially put it below the threshold. I don't know, but is that something to consider?
I can't speak for Elmwood in particular, and this is a little bit anecdotal. I know, like in general, a lot of traffic counts throughout the region like the volumes have been lower, but because volumes have been lower, people have also been driving faster because there's been less traffic on the streets. So while we could see lower volumes, we could actually see higher speeds, which is, what we don't want. So I do think, as part of that, follow-up, if you're doing counts on Greenwood and Thornwood and some of the other neighborhood streets, you'd also want to get it on Elmwood as well, just to understand what is the kind of pre and post speed hump volumes and speed, what are they like, right?
Good point. Well, it sounds like I'm here. I have written down sort of 4 follow-ups to note for this, and to me, it seems like there is a strong case for moving forward with speed humps on Elmwood, the recommended procedure based on the volumes noted, the speeds noted, the fact that it aligns with the active transportation plan and would be coordinated with that as a bike boulevard. And then also incorporating that future monitoring of the rest of the neighborhood. And so it seems because of the stark difference, I know I support the action to move forward with that. It sounds like the other commissioners do as well. At least I don't feel like I've heard strong opposition. So I think if we would agree to move forward with the speed humps at this meeting, then that would go to the residents, obviously, as the next step before actually being implemented. And then if they would get the 60% positive feedback, then that would move forward into implementation. Additionally, then with that, the other things that I'm hearing that we would want to see would be the speed feedback signs integrated into the rotation on Thornwood to get some spot checks there and see if that's successful in slowing some of the speed, as well as potential enforcement monitoring at the stop sign at 21st and Elmwood. That was brought up a couple times. And then obviously, again, the post-construction counts where we could reevaluate how the speed humps are impacting traffic on the adjacent streets, or if there's any noticeable changes once traffic normalizes, which I would foresee to be sometime next year, assuming the speed humps would go in late this year or early next year. So everyone, if I missed anything, please chime in. I don't know if we could just do a show of hands if you're in support of moving forward with the action on Elmwood. All right.
Yes.
All right. I'm on seeing all positives. So Bridget, Dan, I think we can move that forward to the next step.
Fantastic.
And yeah, and then just make those notes on those other items for when we review this again.
I think Commissioner Tyner might have a question.
All right.
No, that's the only way I could raise my hand since my video's not up. So
Sorry.
I was raising my hand.
That's twice now I messed up on you. All right.
No, your
Okay.
video's up. Your video is up.
I see it on my screen, but I don't see it on.
Oh, you're up. You're up. Just so you know.
I see you.
All right.
Yeah. Can I ask one final thing? Is kind of to the discussion Mr. Hams was raising there. So maybe it seems like the traffic calming systems probably aren't appropriate, at least based on our criteria for these other streets. But it does seem like there's almost universal, like it seems like virtually, I think every message that we got essentially was from Kenilworth Gardens, were people in support of something. So is it possible for the staff to maybe report back with what other things can we look at? Maybe it's not a physical change, but is there something else that we should be thinking about? Because there seems to be a community interest in this sightline issue, or whatever exactly it is. I mean, I don't know how to word that better, but is there any way we can incorporate that? I'd like to know that there's some kind of response, I guess is my point, that we're trying, like a program or something that that can improve in this area. I don't want to put you on the spot to solve it right here, but.
Well, I think the speed radar feedback signs are a good first step, and that's kind of why we purchased those signs, was to implement a non-physical treatment, albeit temporarily. They sometimes have lasting impacts, and then we will often implement those in combination with enforcement by the police department. So they can, like Chief Murphy mentioned, they can do their traffic safety surveys at varying times throughout a year as well. So maybe with those two components, we can see if we can make a difference on that street later this year.
Okay.
Yeah, and even though they don't meet the thresholds in the policy now, that doesn't mean that they won't in the future. So there's still a future opportunity if they can reach those limits.
Understood. Yeah. I mean, hopefully they don't, in a sense. We don't want this. We don't want to see more speed there, but.
Right, and Mr. Ham kind of talked about, the idea of, we're looking at speed or we're looking at volume, and really the metric is safety.
Yeah.
And I think those are just kind of proxies for, high speed equals, lower safety, or high volume could increase the risk of, safety issues. So, I think we are looking at safety, but just, it's kind of like, what are the potential risks for that? And, I would say the village's policy is kind of in line with, I'm not aware of other traffic calming policies that kind of start to focus on like population demographics and things like that. They tend to look at speeds and volumes and crashes and things like that. And I recognize though that sometimes those are things that happen and not maybe the perception of things that could happen. So, I think that's where we look at the other category and we try to figure out, speed feedback signs are maybe an easier kind of passive way to kind of check things out and you feel it out. And then if we see that there's more issues, we can certainly try to tackle those, as Bridget mentioned.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add, I think this is a nice logical approach in starting with Elmwood, being that each of these measures does have a cost to the village associated with them, both an immediate cost to construct it as well as the pavement marking cost, which, as you can see and hear, sometimes can be hard to keep up with in the village budget. So I think rather than, blanketing the whole place in speed humps, going about it thoughtfully aligned with the policy is a really nice approach. And, hopefully these will be successful on Elmwood and, take care of the issue, but we'll have those, the chance to revisit it with the post-construction counts, so.
Right, well, with the speeds we're seeing, we can't expect to drive the speed that much. Right, if we get the 85th percentile, we're not going to get that down to 25 or something, or it's probably less likely, or anyway. So there's not that much.
Yeah.
It seems to be it's not actually a speed issue, or not as it is, but not solely.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay. So with that, unless there's anything else, we'll move forward to the next agenda item. Which is public comment on any other topics. Is there any, looking at participants, I'm not seeing any hands raised for public comment on other items. Is there anything on YouTube?
We just have two. Marcel just said thank you, and Charles Drummer said thank you. Any traffic enforcement would be welcome on Elmwood. So that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, and then old business. Dan, do you have updates?
Yeah, I just wanted to provide the commission an update on the progress of the Master Bike and Active Transportation Plan. The plan was presented to the village board last Tuesday, February 9th, and was well received by the board. It is anticipated to be adopted by the village board at their next meeting next Tuesday, February 23rd. So special thanks to the commission and all the work you put in to review and improve the plan over the course of 2 meetings last year. And that's it.
Great. Any new business to discuss?
I just wanted to mention a couple things real quick upcoming this year based on what I just mentioned in old business. We will be having a couple of bike items coming up later this year. We'll be reviewing Greenleaf bike accommodations and pavement marking on Greenleaf east of Poplar. And then we'll also begin discussions on a multi-year bike and active transportation plan, implementation plan.
Sounds good. Any other questions from the commissioners?
No. Marcel, thanks for keeping up with the plowing. I know there's been a lot of snow, and we definitely appreciate you for keeping up with it.
I appreciate that. I'll pass that along to the crews.
We do. I think all of the staff needs a big shout out. I know this is an intense time. So.
Thank you. Well, and thank you for your patience. We're working 12 hours on and off, so we'll get it caught up eventually. So I appreciate your patience.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great to go out and see everything there and be able to drive even when there's 3 feet of snow next to your lot. So thank you to everyone. And I believe with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Gates seconds. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Good night.
All right.
Good evening.
Everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks, everyone.